This is how China makes the perfect grass used in the World Cup. A single World Cup pitch covers nearly 77,000 square feet of engineered ground. That's larger than the floor space of the White House. You heard that right. And the grass system underneath it, the one that controls how the ball rolls, how a player's cleats grip on a full sprint, how the turf survives 64 matches under the best athletes alive, increasingly traces back to China. But most fans have absolutely no idea. So let's start where the grass starts. Not in a field, but in a lab. Not your backyard lawn. You think you know what grass is. You've mowed it, walked on it, maybe even fallen asleep on it. But if you could kneel down on a World Cup pitch and run your hand across the surface, you'd feel the difference immediately. A density, a resistance, an almost unnatural uniformity that your backyard lawn could never replicate. Because the grass on a World Cup pitch has almost nothing in common with the stuff growing outside your window. What you're looking at when the camera pans across that perfect green rectangle before kickoff is one of the most over-engineered surfaces in professional sports. Every single element of it, the species of grass, the height of each blade, the composition of the soil beneath it, the way water drains through it has been selected, tested, and approved to meet standards so strict that most stadiums in the world can't pass them. FIFA doesn't just ask for a nice-looking lawn. They require a pitch that delivers specific ball roll distances, precise levels of shock absorption, exact measurements of surface hardness, and consistent traction across every square inch of the field. Before a single match is played at a World Cup venue, that pitch goes through a battery of scientific tests. Technicians measure how high a ball bounces, how far it travels after contact with the surface, and how much force a player's body absorbs on impact. If any of those numbers fall outside FIFA's approved range, the pitch fails. And a failed pitch means no World Cup match. Years of stadium construction, billions of dollars in investment, an entire nation's hopes of hosting the biggest event on Earth, all of it can hinge on whether the grass passes a bounce test. So how do you build a surface that can pass all of those tests, survive a month of back-to-back elite football, and still look pristine on camera for 2 billion viewers? You don't just plant grass and hope for the best. You engineer it from the ground up. And that engineering starts with a question most people never think to ask. What kind of grass are you actually growing? That answer depends entirely on where in the world the tournament is being played. Choosing the blade. If you've ever looked at a World Cup pitch and assumed it was all one type of grass, you'd be wrong. The species growing on that surface was chosen months, sometimes years in advance, based on a single factor that overrides everything else: climate. And getting that choice wrong doesn't just mean a bad playing surface. It means dead grass on live television in front of the entire planet. In cooler climates, think England, Russia, Northern Europe, the go-to species are perennial ryegrass and Kentucky bluegrass. Perennial ryegrass germinates fast, establishes dense coverage quickly, and recovers well from the kind of punishment that comes with professional football. Kentucky bluegrass fills in the gaps, spreading through underground stems to create a thick, self-repairing carpet. Together, they give you a surface that can take a sliding tackle and bounce back within days. But host a World Cup in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, and those cool season grasses will be dead inside a week. For extreme heat, groundskeepers turn to warm season varieties like bermudagrass, a species that thrives in scorching temperatures and handles drought far better than anything from the ryegrass family. It's tough, aggressive, and practically unkillable in the heat. The problem is, bermudagrass goes dormant and turns brown in cooler months, which is why tournaments in transitional climates sometimes overseed with ryegrass on top of a Bermuda base, creating a layered system that stays green year-round. Now here's where it gets interesting. Choosing the species is only half the equation. Someone has to grow these grasses at scale, millions of square feet of elite, competition-grade turf seed and sod, and deliver it to stadiums on the other side of the world, on schedule, and at a quality level that can survive FIFA's testing gauntlet. That kind of agricultural output requires enormous production capacity, advanced breeding programs, and a supply chain that can move fast across continents. And that's exactly the kind of operation China has been quietly building for years. While most of the football world was focused on what was happening on the pitch, Chinese agricultural companies were cultivating specialized sports turf varieties at a scale that few countries can match. But growing the grass was never the hard part. The real innovation is what they started putting inside it. The grass that isn't entirely grass. Here's something most football fans don't realize. The pitch at a World Cup final isn't pure natural grass. It hasn't been for years. What you're actually looking at is a hybrid, a surface that's roughly 95% natural grass and 5% synthetic fiber, woven together into a single system that's stronger, more durable, and more resilient than anything nature could produce on its own. The concept sounds simple enough. Take the best of nature and reinforce it with the best of engineering. But the execution behind it is anything but simple. In a hybrid pitch, millions of synthetic fibers, typically made from polypropylene or polyethylene, are injected roughly 7 inches deep into the soil using laser-guided machines. These fibers are spaced in a tight grid, about 3/4 of an inch apart, across the entire playing surface. As the natural grass grows, its roots physically wrap around these synthetic strands, anchoring themselves into a reinforced structure that holds the turf together under conditions that would destroy a conventional pitch. The result is a surface that can handle 4 times the playing hours of regular grass. Where a natural pitch might survive 250 hours of use per year before falling apart, a hybrid system pushes that number past 1,000. The first system to do this at scale was Deso Grassmaster, developed by a Dutch carpet company back in 1989. For over 2 decades, it dominated the market. Then, in 2015, a rival system called CCGrass launched, and just 3 years later, it was installed at 6 of the 12 stadiums for the 2018 World Cup in Russia, including the Luzhniki Stadium, where the final was played. That made it the first World Cup final in history, contested on anything other than pure natural grass. 1 billion viewers watched that match. Almost none of them knew the surface under those players' boots was part machine. But here's what almost nobody was paying attention to. While the Western companies were getting the headlines and the stadium contracts, Chinese manufacturers were doing something arguably more important. They were building the supply chain underneath all of it. The synthetic fibers used in hybrid systems, the polyethylene yarns, the polypropylene monofilaments, the reinforced backing materials increasingly come from Chinese factories. Companies like CCGrass, the single largest synthetic turf manufacturer on the planet, now operate factory complexes spanning over 800,000 square feet across China, Vietnam, and Indonesia, producing more than 100 million square feet of turf material every single year. Their products are installed in more than 140 countries. They hold FIFA, World Rugby, and FIH preferred producer certifications, and most fans watching the World Cup have never heard their name. But the fibers stitched into the grass were only one layer of this story. Because underneath that hybrid surface, there's an entire hidden world that makes the whole thing work. The world beneath your feet. If you could peel back the grass on a World Cup pitch like a carpet, what you'd find underneath would look less like soil and more like a piece of infrastructure. Because that's exactly what it is. The ground beneath a professional football surface is engineered layer by layer, the same way you'd engineer a road or a building foundation. And every single layer has a job to do. At the top, you've got the root zone, a carefully blended mix of sand, organic matter, and sometimes peat, designed not for nutrition, but for drainage. This isn't the rich, dark soil you'd find in a garden. It's almost entirely sand-based, because sand lets water pass through fast. On a World Cup pitch, the drainage rate has to exceed 6 inches of rainfall per hour. That means even in a monsoon-level downpour, the surface stays playable. No puddles, no mud, no excuses. Picture the heaviest rainstorm you've ever stood in. This pitch would swallow every drop before your boots got wet. Below the root zone sits a gravel drainage layer, usually 4 to 8 inches deep, with a network of perforated pipes running through it that channel water away from the pitch and into underground collection systems. And beneath that, depending on the stadium and the climate, you'll often find a network of heating cables or cooling pipes embedded in the substructure, a climate control system for the ground itself. In cold weather tournaments, undersoil heating keeps the root zone above freezing, so the grass doesn't die. In extreme heat, like a World Cup hosted in the Middle East, cooling systems circulate chilled water beneath the surface to keep root temperatures from cooking the grass alive. Think about that for a second. There are stadiums on this planet where the ground itself has air conditioning. These aren't luxury features, they're survival systems. Without them, the pitch wouldn't last a week under tournament conditions. And here's the part that connects it all back to the same story. The heating cables, the drainage sensors, the perforated piping, the moisture monitoring systems embedded in that substructure. A significant and growing share of those components are manufactured in China. Chinese industrial output doesn't just supply the grass and the fibers, it supplies the guts of the pitch itself. The parts you'll never see on camera, but without which the entire surface would fail. Then came the problem that nobody saw coming. What happens when the stadium itself starts blocking the sun? Faking the sun. You'd think the hardest part of keeping a World Cup pitch alive would be the football. 64 matches, thousands of sprints, tackles, and slide challenges tearing into the surface over 30 days. But for many modern stadiums, the biggest threat to the grass isn't the players, it's the building itself. As stadiums have gotten bigger, taller, and more architecturally ambitious, their roofs and upper tiers have started casting massive shadows across the pitch. Some venues are fully enclosed. Others have retractable roofs that stay closed for months during construction or off-season periods. And grass, no matter how elite the cultivar, needs sunlight to survive. Block that light for too long, and the turf starts to thin, weaken, and die. Slowly at first, then all at once. You can have the most perfectly engineered root zone on the planet. If the grass above it can't photosynthesize, none of it matters. The solution was to bring the sun indoors. And that meant grow lights, enormous mobile rigs fitted with hundreds of high-intensity LED panels that roll across the pitch on tracks, bathing the grass in the exact wavelengths of light it needs to keep growing. If you've never seen one in person, imagine a wall of purple-pink light, the width of a football pitch, hovering just feet above the turf, crawling forward in total silence. These aren't simple floodlights. They're horticultural lighting systems calibrated to mimic the specific spectrum of natural sunlight that drives photosynthesis heavy on the red and blue wavelengths, precisely tuned to the grass species growing beneath them. A single rig can weigh several tons and cover the entire width of a pitch, creeping slowly from one end to the other over the course of hours, simulating a full day of sun exposure even inside a completely enclosed stadium. And this is where China's dominance becomes almost impossible to ignore. China is the largest manufacturer of LED lighting systems on Earth. The country's LED industry is anchored in Guangdong province alone, home to more than 10,000 lighting enterprises. One single township, Guzhen, in the city of Zhongshan funnels more than 70% of China's entire lighting commerce through its factories and wholesale markets. One town, 70%. A place most football fans couldn't find on a map is quietly powering the systems that keep World Cup grass alive. When stadium projects in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Southeast Asia, or Europe need grow light rigs to keep their pitches alive, the LED panels inside those systems are overwhelmingly likely to have been manufactured in Chinese facilities. The same goes for the sensors, the automated control systems, and the precision irrigation components that work alongside them: moisture detectors, subsurface drip lines, climate monitoring electronics. China doesn't just make the grass, it makes the machines that keep the grass breathing. But even all of this, the species selection, the hybrid fibers, the engineered soil, the underground climate systems, the artificial sunlight, only tells you how the pitch is built. It doesn't explain how one country managed to position itself at the center of almost every layer of that process. That answer has less to do with grass and more to do with scale. The factory floor. To understand how China ended up at the center of the World Cup pitch, you have to stop thinking about grass and start thinking about manufacturing. Because what China did with sports turf is exactly what it's done with electronics, textiles, solar panels, and dozens of other industries. It scaled production to a level that made competition almost pointless. Take CCGrass, a name that means nothing to most football fans, but everything to the industry behind them. Founded in 2002 in Nanjing, it started as a modest synthetic turf operation. Today, it operates the largest artificial grass factory complex in the world, facilities spanning across China, Vietnam, and Indonesia, with a combined floor area of nearly 800,000 square feet and more than 4,000 employees. Annual production capacity exceeds 100 million square feet of synthetic turf. To put that in perspective, a standard FIFA World Cup pitch covers about 77,000 square feet. That means a single Chinese company produces enough turf material every year to cover more than 1,300 World Cup pitches. You heard that right. One company. 1,300 pitches every year. And CCGrass isn't alone. China is home to dozens of FIFA-certified turf manufacturers. Taishan, the first Chinese company to earn both FIFA and FIH dual certification, invested 380 million yuan to build a dedicated high-end production base. Mightygrass operates factories in both China and Saudi Arabia, with a U.S. warehouse for rapid Western distribution. City Green Turf became a FIFA licensee in 2019 and now exports to over 120 countries. These aren't backyard operations. They're industrial powerhouses with in-house yarn extrusion, tufting lines, and backing production full vertical integration from raw polymer pellet to finished pitch surface. But this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't charity. China's domestic football ambitions played a direct role. Over the past decade, massive government-backed investment poured into sports infrastructure, new stadiums, training academies, professional league facilities, all of which needed elite quality playing surfaces. That domestic demand created a proving ground for Chinese turf companies to refine their products, earn international certifications, and build the kind of production expertise that foreign buyers couldn't ignore. What started as a domestic supply chain quietly evolved into a global export machine. And once you understand that machine, you start to realize that the grass is just the beginning. Because when you pull back far enough, you see that China's fingerprints aren't just on the pitch. They're on the entire stadium, bigger than the grass. You've spent this entire video learning about the pitch, the species, the fibers, the soil, the drainage, the grow lights, the factories. But now zoom out, stand outside the stadium and look at the whole thing. Because the grass beneath the players' feet is just one thread in a web of Chinese manufacturing so vast that the modern World Cup would be almost unrecognizable without it. Start with the structure itself. The steel that frames many of the world's newest stadiums, the beams, the trusses, the retractable roof mechanisms, is increasingly sourced from Chinese mills. China produces more than half of the world's steel. That's not a marginal advantage. That's dominance at a structural level, literally holding the building up. The seat you're sitting in, the roof over your head, the ramp you walked up to reach your section, there's a good chance all of it started as raw material in a Chinese furnace. Now step inside. The massive LED screens wrapping around the concourses and hanging above the pitch, the ones that replay every goal in ultra-high definition for 80,000 screaming fans, are built with display panels from Chinese manufacturers like Layard and Abson, companies that specialize in fine-pitch RGB displays for sports arenas and broadcast environments. The HVAC systems circulating air through enclosed venues, the escalators moving fans between levels, the electrical infrastructure powering it all. Chinese components run through every system like a bloodstream. Walk outside to the fan zones. The merchandise, the scarves, the replica jerseys, the foam fingers, the flags. You already know where most of that comes from. You've known for years. But it goes deeper than souvenirs. The temporary seating for overflow venues, the modular hospitality units, the broadcast cabling, the security camera systems, layer after layer of the tournament's physical infrastructure connects back to Chinese supply chains. And this isn't something that happened overnight. It's the result of decades of industrial investment, manufacturing refinement, and export infrastructure that positioned China as the default supplier for large-scale global construction projects. When FIFA awards a World Cup to a host nation, and that nation starts building or upgrading stadiums, the procurement trail leads to China not because of any backroom deal, but because no other country on earth can deliver that volume of specialized materials at that speed and at that price point. So, when you watch a World Cup match, when you see the ball glide across a perfect green surface under floodlights inside an 80,000-seat arena, you're not just watching a football game. You're watching the output of a global supply chain, and China is sitting at the center of it. But there's still one final thing most people miss about the pitch itself. The pitch is the product. Let's go back to where we started. You're watching the World Cup final. 2 billion people are tuned in across every time zone on the planet. The camera sweeps low across the pitch, and you see it, that impossibly perfect green surface. Every blade standing at attention, the lines razor sharp, the turf holding firm as the best players on the planet sprint and slide and strike across it at full speed. It looks effortless, like someone just rolled out a carpet of pure nature under the floodlights. But now you know better. You know what nobody in that stadium is thinking about. Not the players, not the coaches, not the commentators, not the billions of people watching from home. Nobody is looking at that grass and wondering where it came from. Nobody is asking who made it, who grew it, who stitched synthetic fibers into it, or who built the machines that keep it alive. But you are, because now you know. You know that the grass species growing on that surface was selected through years of climate research and agronomic testing. You know that buried inside that natural turf are millions of synthetic fibers, engineered polymers, stitched 7 inches deep by laser-guided machines, anchoring the roots into a reinforced matrix that can survive 4 times the abuse of a regular pitch. You know the soil beneath it isn't soil at all. It's a sand-based root zone engineered to drain 6 inches of rain per hour, sitting on top of a gravel layer threaded with perforated pipes, heating cables, and moisture sensors that regulate the ground's temperature and hydration in real time. You know that when the stadium roof blocks the sun, giant LED grow light rigs roll across the surface on tracks, feeding the grass an artificial spectrum of light calibrated down to the nanometer, and that those LEDs were almost certainly manufactured in a cluster of factories in southern China that produce the majority of the world's lighting technology. You know that the synthetic fibers in the hybrid system, the drainage components, the irrigation electronics, and the turf itself increasingly flow out of Chinese factory complexes so large they produce enough material every year to cover more than 1,000 professional pitches. And you know that the stadium surrounding that pitch, the steel skeleton, the LED displays, the broadcast infrastructure, the climate control systems draws from the same Chinese manufacturing ecosystem that supplies the grass beneath it. This is what a World Cup pitch actually is. Not a lawn, not a garden. It's a precision instrument assembled from botany, polymer science, materials engineering, and industrial-scale agriculture designed to perform flawlessly for exactly 30 days under the most intense scrutiny in global sport. Every goal, every save, every last-minute winner that sends an entire nation into tears, it all happens on top of a surface that was engineered, manufactured, and shipped from the other side of the world. And the country that quietly supplies more of that instrument than any casual fan would ever suspect isn't trying to win the World Cup on the field. It already won the one underneath it.